I'm Rachel Ward, and I'd like to read the first encounter between Elias and Clara, the main characters in Love After All, by Ewald Arenz. Clara is selling the country cottage that she bought with her former husband, and Elias and his current girlfriend Vera have come to visit it. Not that they actually want to buy the house, but just for nosiness and to have a look around. Come on, said Vera. The women must be waiting. Yes, said Elias, let's not keep the woman waiting. Then came the house. It was small and decidedly pretty. It must have been repainted a few years ago, but the paint had now gently faded. A dog rose was running wild over the fence, its tendrils reaching up over the small wooden gate. You really could imagine, thought Elias, that if a briar spent 100 years running rampant like that, you actually would need a sword to cut your way through to the castle. Not that this was a castle. It was little more than a cottage, 1.5 stories high. There's a car there, Vera pointed to the vehicle parked by the fence. Maybe she's inside or in the garden. They looked for a bell. There wasn't one. Vera pushed the little garden gate open and they walked up to the front door. It was locked and there was no doorbell here either. I'll go round the back, said Elias. I'll wait here, said Vera, trying to see in through one of the windows. The garden was large. To left and right, a narrow brick path led around the house. It too looked as though it had gone long unused. Green shoots were sprouting amidst brickwork. He ducked under the branches of an elder tree and stumbled. As he came around the corner, slap into the wooden veranda, which was a good 20 centimetres higher than the path. Clara had heard the voices outside the house with half an ear, but hadn't been expecting them to be the prospective buyers already. It couldn't be as late as all that. She'd left her phone in the car and paid no attention to the clock chimes. She'd walked through the house one last time. She didn't want anything personal on display beyond the furniture. Mind you, everything was personal. Paint on the walls, the tiles, the stripped and oiled door frames. All the things you do when you buy a ruin, she thought with time as well. When you have no idea how much work that will really be. Once upon a time, she'd been mad about large manor houses. Just as well she'd never come into the unfortunate situation of having to throw money down the drain. Even this little cottage had been a money pit, the kind where you didn't even hear an echo from the bottom. It was icy in the house. She ought to have let a little warm air in. She opened the patio doors and saw a man stumble onto the veranda, fall to his knees and immediately get up again. It's a long time since I had that happen, said Clara. Elias rubbed his knee for a moment, but he hadn't fallen hard. The woman was leaning on the door frame. She was wearing a skirt suit. It looked unexpectedly fashionable and didn't fit with this little house in the least. Could she be the estate agent? Vera hadn't mentioned one. Sorry? He asked. Clara glanced at him. It was hard to say whether he was in his mid-30s or over 40. Younger than her, anyway. There was something boyish about him, but there were a few fine lines around his mouth which, well, who knew? A man falling to his knees in front of me before introducing himself, said Clara dryly. It's a long time since I had that happen. I think it's more fitting this way around. Besides, then I don't have to apologise for just walking into your garden. Should I introduce myself now, or was that sweeping bow enough to be going on with? Elias had liked her response, and it prompted his cheek. There were some people, a very few, who didn't react the way most did. People who didn't act shocked, and then asked the blatantly obvious, "Are you hurt?" just because it was the thing to do. I was expecting a woman, Clara said now. Are you with her, or did you fall over on my veranda by chance? The lady is round the front waiting for you. I'm just the entertainment. Is this really your veranda, or are you the estate agent? Clara had to laugh. The estate agent? Me? Do I look like I am? Elias glanced around the garden. Old fruit trees, and a few younger ones between them, a wonky ancient shed, a cold frame that had run so wild that you could only just make out its concrete edging. One of the panels in the wooden cover had broken. And he looked back at Clara. In comparison to the garden, certainly. She liked the fact that she didn't know right away when he was being serious and when he wasn't. She looked down at herself. long had it been since she'd had a conversation like this? So light. There was nothing to it but the pleasure of knocking skillful balls at each other. I had the choice, she said, between a gardener and a dressmaker. Elias smiled. If you can afford a dressmaker, why are you selling the house? His ball had skimmed the net. Think about it, she answered mockingly, or look at my clothes. He had to laugh. Phew, she thought. She hadn't intended to give a serious answer. Come on, we'll open the door for your wife. She pushed the veranda door right open. Elias stepped into the house. It was very cold. We're not married. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Asked Clara, already shaking her head with reluctance before she had finished the question. It was none of her business. It was just revenge for the one about why she was selling the house, and he couldn't help that. He'd asked it as part of their little game, not to hurt her. Such a pretty house. I like it when a place isn't renovated to death, when you don't drive the ancestors out of the walls. He actually says ancestors, said Clara. She couldn't help remarking. And you don't like answering silly questions. They'd reached the front door. Nor do you, replied Elias promptly. Nor do you.